The summer heat pressed down on the small town of Ashford, where two boys ran across golden fields that stretched for miles. Ethan and Ryan had grown up together, not just as family, but as best friends. Ethan was the only son of Daniel Carter, a hard-working man who owned a modest construction business. Ryan, his cousin, was the child of Daniel's younger brother, Richard. Their families lived side by side, sharing meals, laughter, and traditions. Ethan, with his calm and thoughtful nature, was the kind of boy who dreamed of building something lasting. He often helped his father with blueprints, imagining towers that could touch the sky. Ryan, on the other hand, had fire in his eyes. He was bold, restless, and competitive. Every game between them turned into a challenge. Every word felt like a test of who was stronger. Yet, in their childhood, it seemed harmless. When they built forts out of wood, Ethan would design them, and Ryan would hammer the nails with reckless speed. When they played football with neighborhood kids, Ryan would dive headfirst, while Ethan carefully planned the strategy. They were different, but together they balanced each other. To the outside world, they were like brothers, but deep inside, Ryan carried a seed of envy that only grew as the years passed. It began with small things. At school, teachers praised Ethan for his intelligence and patience. He was the boy who could solve math problems faster than anyone else. Ryan hated it. He wanted the spotlight. Yet his impulsive nature often led him into trouble. When Ethan won a local science fair, Ryan's smile barely hid the bitterness in his eyes. The turning point came one winter evening. Both families gathered in the Carter household for dinner. Daniel, proud of his son, announced that one day Ethan would inherit the business and carry the Carter legacy forward. "He has the mind for it," Daniel said, his hand resting proudly on Ethan's shoulder. Ryan's fork froze midway to his mouth. No one noticed the way his jaw tightened, the way his eyes flickered like a storm building quietly in the distance. Richard, his father, shifted uncomfortably, but said nothing. That night, Ryan made a silent vow. If Ethan was destined to have everything, Ryan would find a way to take it. As teenagers, their bond grew strained. Ethan focused on studies, while Ryan chased thrills: illegal street races, gambling, and parties that lasted until dawn. Whenever Ethan tried to talk sense into him, Ryan brushed it off. "You think you're better than me?" he would snap. Ethan never answered. He never needed to. By the time they turned 20, the contrast between them was undeniable. Ethan worked with his father, earning respect in the community. Ryan, meanwhile, struggled with debts and bad choices, but he never showed weakness. Instead, he hid it beneath arrogance and a dangerous charm. Then came the night. Everything changed. It was late summer. Ethan's family had hosted a small celebration at their farmhouse. Business was good, and Daniel spoke proudly of expanding into neighboring towns. Neighbors congratulated him, shaking Ethan's hand, telling him he would carry the Carter name higher than ever. Ryan stood in the corner, glass in hand, watching. His envy had festered into something darker now, something poisonous. The whispers in his mind told him he deserved the empire, not Ethan. He deserved the respect, the wealth, the power. As the night stretched on, Ryan slipped away from the party, his mind spinning with dangerous ideas. He knew secrets about the business, weak spots that only family could know. He also knew the kind of people who thrived on ruin, the kind of men who could destroy everything with the right amount of money and persuasion. That was the night Ryan began to plot, and Ethan, blissfully unaware, laughed with his parents, never realizing the cousin, who had once been like a brother, would soon become his greatest enemy. Betrayal didn't come all at once. It arrived quietly, like a slow storm creeping over the horizon. Ethan never saw it coming. How could he? Ryan smiled when they met, drank with him at the bar, and called him brother. But behind the smile, his cousin was building a plan that would shatter everything the Carters had worked for. Ryan had fallen deep into debt. His gambling habits had caught the attention of men who didn't forgive. They wanted their money, and Ryan had none. When they threatened to take his car, his house, and maybe even his life, Ryan panicked. That's when the idea formed: what if he could hand them something bigger, something that would wipe his slate clean and earn him a place among them? He thought of the Carter business. Ethan's family had loyal clients, trusted contracts, and money moving steadily through their accounts. Ryan knew the system. He'd watched his uncle Daniel manage it for years. He knew where the records were kept, what passwords were used, and which competitors would pay handsomely for that kind of information. One late night, while Ethan and his parents slept soundly in their farmhouse, Ryan crept into Daniel's office. He moved like a thief, his hands trembling as he opened the filing cabinets. He copied documents, scanned contracts, and snapped photos of confidential papers. He even took a flash drive filled with sensitive business accounts. By the time dawn broke, Ryan had everything he needed to betray his own blood. The next weeks unfolded like a nightmare. Suddenly, the Carter business began to collapse. Deals fell through. Longtime clients turned away without explanation. Competitors undercut prices using information that only an insider could have leaked. Ethan's father, Daniel, grew more stressed with each passing day. He stayed up at night, running numbers, trying to find the holes. "Someone's sabotaging us," he muttered one evening, his voice hoarse. "It's like they know our every move before we make it." Ethan, worried, tried to help. He checked the books, called clients, and reassured his father they'd recover. But the more he searched, the clearer it became. Someone close had betrayed them. He never suspected Ryan. How could he? Ryan was family. One evening, Ethan drove over to Ryan's place, hoping for advice. He found his cousin sitting in the living room, surrounded by empty bottles and cigarette smoke. "We're in trouble," Ethan admitted, dropping into a chair. "The company's bleeding money. Contracts are being stolen before we can even sign them. Dad's health is breaking under the stress." Ryan leaned back, feigning surprise. "Man, but maybe your old man's just slipping. Business is brutal. Maybe it's time you step in, take charge." Ethan shook his head. "No, I trust Dad. He'll fix this. We just need to find the leak." Ryan's lips curled into a smirk. He quickly disguised with a sip of beer. Inside, he felt a twisted satisfaction. Ethan's faith in him made the betrayal sweeter. The final blow came when the bank called in their loans. With contracts gone and debts piling high, Daniel couldn't pay. The Carters lost their business, their reputation, and soon after, their home. Ethan stood in the yard, watching as strangers carried furniture into trucks. His mother wept quietly, clutching her wedding photo, while his father's face looked hollow, broken. Ryan came to comfort them. He put a hand on Ethan's shoulder, whispering lies wrapped in sympathy. "I'm here for you, cousin, always." But behind that mask, Ryan was celebrating. He had sold out his uncle's company to rivals and erased his debts in the process. The Carters' downfall was his ticket to power. Weeks later, tragedy struck. Daniel, crushed under the weight of failure, suffered a heart attack. He died in the hospital bed with Ethan holding his hand. Ethan's world collapsed. His father was gone. His mother was shattered, and everything they had built had been stolen. Standing in the hospital hallway, Ethan clenched his fists until his nails dug into his palms. "This wasn't an accident," he whispered. "Someone did this to us." And though he didn't yet know who, Ethan swore silently that he would find the traitor in when he did. The price of blood would be paid in full. Ashford was never the same after Daniel Carter's death. What once felt like a small town of opportunities now seemed like a graveyard of broken promises. Ethan walked through the streets and felt the stare's pity from some, suspicion from others. The Carter family name, once respected, had turned into a whisper of failure. Ryan, on the other hand, began to rise. With Daniel gone and Ethan too shattered to fight, Ryan stepped forward as if fate had chosen him. He opened new deals with competitors, the same ones who had bought Carter. Secrets from him. Suddenly, Ryan was the man everyone wanted to know. He had money, power, and charm, and the town embraced him as though he were a savior. To Ethan, it was unbearable. His mother, weighed down by grief, slipped into silence. The house they rented after losing their home felt small, suffocating. Bills piled up, and Ethan found himself working odd jobs to keep them afloat. He carried bricks at construction sites, served tables at diners, and even cleaned up warehouses late at night. The once promising young man, who had dreamed of designing buildings, now struggled to survive. But every time he passed the Harrington Plaza, the new office tower, Ryan had invested in Angar, burned inside him. He saw Ryan's face on billboards, smiling, as if he were a self-made man, as if he hadn't climbed to success on Ethan's ruin. The betrayal gnawed at Ethan. He still didn't have proof, but the pieces didn't add up any other way. Contracts stolen, timing too perfect, and Ryan's sudden rise. He began to suspect, and suspicion grew into certainty. One night, Ethan confronted Ryan outside a club. "You knew," Ethan said, his voice shaking. "You knew what was happening to us. You could have helped." Ryan smirked, adjusting his expensive jacket. "Help, Ethan. You think the world owes you something. Your dad wasn't strong enough to handle the game. That's all. This is business." Ethan's fists tightened. "You ruined us. I don't know how yet, but I'll find out. And when I do..." Ryan stepped closer, his breath heavy with alcohol and arrogance. "When you do what? You're nothing now. You lost your home, your father, your name. Look at you working like a dog, while I own half this town. Face it, cousin, the world chose me, not you." Those words cut deeper than any blade. Ethan lunged, but Ryan's guards pulled him back, throwing him onto the pavement like trash. Ryan walked away, laughing. Ethan lay there in the cold night, staring at the neon lights above. In that moment, he knew his cousin's betrayal wasn't just suspicion, it was truth. And it was personal. The months that followed were the darkest of Ethan's life. His mother's health declined under the stress, and hospital visits drained what little savings they had. Ethan sold his father's tools, the last remnants of Daniel's business, just to pay the bills. Ryan never visited. He never offered help. Instead, he flaunted his wealth at every opportunity: luxury cars, high-end parties, and headlines in the local paper. Ethan's pain turned to anger, and anger hardened into something sharper. Every day he worked, every sleepless night he endured, added fuel to the fire inside him. Ryan thought he had destroyed Ethan, but in truth, he had forged him into something stronger. The breaking point came when Ethan's mother passed away quietly in her sleep. She had carried her grief too heavily, her heart too tired to keep beating. Ethan sat beside her bed, numb, as the doctor explained. That night, standing alone at her grave, Ethan whispered, "You took everything from me, Ryan. My father, my mother, our name. But you made one mistake. You left me alive. And I promise you, I will rise again. I will destroy you the way you destroyed us." The vow echoed in his chest like thunder. Ethan left Ashford soon after, disappearing into the wider world. No one knew where he went. Ryan assumed his cousin had finally broken, vanished into obscurity like a ghost. But Ethan wasn't gone. He was preparing. And one day, years later, when the time was right, he would return. 10 years had passed since Ethan left Ashford. For the people in town, his name had faded into a cautionary tale. "The boy who lost it all," they whispered. Meanwhile, Ryan had built an empire. He owned construction companies across the state, restaurants, nightclubs, even stakes in real estate. The Carter name had died, but Ryan's name was everywhere. Newspapers, magazines, billboards. He had everything he once envied, or so it seemed. One autumn evening, a black car rolled into Ashford. At the wheel sat a man no one recognized at first. Broad shoulders, sharp jaw, neatly cut hair, and eyes that carried the weight of scars unseen. It was Ethan Carter. He had changed. Gone was the soft-spoken boy who once dreamed of designing towers. In his place stood a man who had studied, worked, and hardened himself in the shadows. Ethan had spent years abroad, learning everything Ryan had mastered, and more. Business, strategy, law, negotiation. He had prepared himself for one purpose only: revenge. Ethan checked into a quiet hotel under a different name. From his window, he could see the glowing sign of Carter & Co. Construction. Except the name wasn't Carter anymore. Ryan had erased that part, branding it simply Carterian Enterprises, as if Ethan's father had never existed. The sight made Ethan's chest tighten, but he didn't let rage control him. This wasn't the time. He had learned patience. That night, Ethan walked through the streets of Ashford. He saw new restaurants, new plazas, new faces. Yet beneath the shiny exterior, the town felt colder, darker. Ryan had built wealth, yes, but he had done it with greed, fear, and corruption. Ethan could see it in the nervous shopkeepers, in the whispers about unpaid debts and silent threats. This was no empire. It was a house of cards, waiting for the right wind to bring it down. Next day, Ethan began his silent work. He visited old friends and allies, introducing himself carefully. Some didn't recognize him at first, but when he spoke his name, their eyes widened. "Ethan Carter, we thought you were gone for good." "I was," he answered, with a small smile. "But not anymore." Slowly, he began to gather information. He learned about Ryan's network of businesses, the deals he had made, the enemies he had hidden. Ethan didn't attack right away. He studied, mapped, and prepared. At night, he sat in his hotel room, looking at old photos of his parents. His father's proud smile, his mother's gentle eyes. He spoke to them, quietly. "I'm here, and I won't stop until he pays." The first time Ethan saw Ryan again was at a charity gala. Ryan entered the hall, dressed in a tailored suit, surrounded by men who laughed at his every word. His smile was wide, his confidence unshaken. But then his eyes fell on Ethan across the room. For a moment, Ryan froze. He blinked, as if seeing a ghost. Ethan stood tall, calm, a glass of wine in his hand, his gaze steady and cold. "Ethan," Ryan whispered to himself. His smirk returned quickly, but behind it was something else: fear. Ryan crossed the room, forcing a grin. Well, look who crawled back from the dead. Cousin Ethan. I almost thought you'd disappeared forever." Ethan raised his glass slightly. Surprise? Their eyes locked, and in that silent exchange, Ryan understood. Ethan hadn't returned to reconcile. He had returned to settle the score. That night, Ryan lay awake, staring at the ceiling. He had taken Ethan's family, his home, his future. He thought it was over, but Ethan was back, stronger, sharper, and more dangerous than ever. For the first time in years, Ryan felt the one thing he hated most. Fear didn't strike fast. He had learned that revenge wasn't about rigid, was about precision. A single blow wouldn't be enough. If he wanted Ryan to suffer the way his family had, he would have to tear his empire apart, brick by brick, trust by trust, until nothing remained. And so the game began. Ethan started small. He contacted suppliers who had long dealt with Ryan's companies. Quietly, he offered them better terms through shell corporations he had set up under false names. Within weeks, shipments that Ryan relied on were being delayed or rerouted. His projects slowed, costs piled up, and frustration began to show among his managers. At the same time, Ethan hired private investigators to dig into Ryan's past. He didn't just want business flaws. He wanted secrets, and there were plenty. Bribes to city officials, backroom deals with shady contractors, intimidation tactics to silence rivals. Ryan's empire wasn't built on brilliance alone, was built on corruption. Ethan documented everything, storing files and recordings carefully. He wasn't ready to expose it yet, not until Ryan was at his weakest. One evening, Ethan accidentally ran into one of Ryan's closest business partners, a developer named Marcus Hale, over drinks. Ethan played his role well, charming, sharp, but not too eager. "Funny," Marcus said, swirling his glass. "You remind me of someone." "Ethan Carter, right. I thought you left this town years ago." Ethan smiled faintly. "Some ghosts don't stay buried." Marcus laughed, but the unease in his eyes was clear. Ethan leaned closer. "Be careful where you place your trust, Marcus. Some men build empires on lies, and when those lies collapse, everyone standing near them gets buried too." Marcus said nothing, but the seed was planted. Meanwhile, Ryan grew restless. Strange things were happening. Deals fell apart. Clients hesitated. Rumors spread of a new competitor entering the market. Ryan sensed something wrong, but he couldn't trace it back to Ethan. Still, Ryan's paranoia grew. At late-night meetings, he barked at his advisors, demanding answers. "Find out who's behind this. Someone's targeting me. Someone's trying to tear me down." But his men couldn't find proof. Ethan was too careful, too patient. The true battle wasn't in the boardroom. It was in their minds. Ethan knew Ryan better than anyone. His strengths, his weaknesses, his arrogance. Ryan thrived on control. So Ethan's strategy was simple. make him feel like he was losing it. Anonymous letters began arriving at Ryan's office. Short, sharp sentences. You can't hide the past. Everything you stole will be taken back. Blood remembers. Ryan tore them up, but the words stayed in his head. At night, he dreamed of Ethan's cold stare from the gala and woke up sweating. Weeks passed, and Ryan's empire started to crack. His investors demanded explanations. His workers threatened strikes. Competitors circled like vultures. And through it all, Ethan watched from the shadows, never revealing himself, never giving Ryan a clear enemy to fight. It was like poison dripping slowly into Ryan's veins. He was alive, but every day felt closer to death. One night, Ethan stood on the balcony of his hotel, looking at the glittering lights of Ryan's towers. He whispered softly into the night, "This is just the beginning. Cousin, you took my family. Now, I'll take everything you've ever loved. And when you're left with nothing, I'll be waiting." And with that vow, the mind games continued. Ryan Harrington had always prided himself on control. He controlled the deals, the people, the money, even the very image of himself that Ashford admired. But now, for the first time in years, cracks were showing, and Ethan knew exactly where to press. It started with the city contracts. Ryan had secured a massive government deal to build a new civic center, his biggest project yet, one that would cement his legacy. But suddenly, the city council pulled out, citing concerns about financial irregularities. Ryan stormed into the mayor's office, demanding answers. "This is a mistake," he snapped, slamming papers on the desk. "My company has delivered for this city for a decade." The mayor shifted uncomfortably. "Ryan, off the record. Your name is circulating in ways I can't ignore. Bribes, falsified reports. People are whispering. I can't risk my seat backing you right now." Ryan left fuming. Outside, reporters swarmed, asking questions about corruption. Ryan shoved past them, but the cameras caught his anger. By the next morning, headlines read, "Harrington Empire under fire." At the same time, Ethan quietly reached out to Ryan's employees. He didn't need to lie. He only needed to remind them of the truth. Late payments, broken promises, exploited workers. One by one, discontent spread. A group of foremen even staged a walkout on one of Ryan's high-profile projects, leaving half a skyscraper unfinished. Ryan shouted, threatened, threw money at the problem, but the damage was done. The cracks in his empire were widening. And then came the betrayal. Marcus Hale, the same partner Ethan had spoken 2 weeks earlier, suddenly withdrew millions in funding from a joint project with Ryan. "Just business," Marcus said with a fake smile, though Ryan could see the fear in his eyes. "Too much heat around you right now. I can't risk being dragged down." Ryan's fists clenched. "You think you can just walk away from me?" Marcus leaned closer. "Careful, Ryan. The tide's turning. You might not be as untouchable as you think." Those words echoed in Ryan's mind long after Marcus left. At night, Ryan drank heavily, pacing the halls of his mansion. The whispers wouldn't leave him. Anonymous letters appeared on his desk again. His phone rang with blocked numbers, silent calls that ended as soon as he answered. He tried to convince himself it wasn't Ethan. It couldn't be Ethan. He had destroyed Ethan years ago, but the doubt gnawed at him. One night, unable to take it anymore, Ryan drove to the graveyard, where Daniel Carter and his wife were buried. The cold wind whipped at his coat as he stood before the headstones. "This is your son's doing, isn't it?" Ryan muttered, as if the dead could answer. "He's come back for me. I should have finished him when I had the chance." His voice cracked. For the first time in years, Ryan admitted the one thing he could never say out loud: he was afraid. Meanwhile, Ethan moved carefully, methodically. He didn't celebrate Ryan's collapse. He only studied it. Each broken deal, each betrayal, each sleepless night was another step closer to the end. But Ethan wasn't satisfied yet. He wanted Ryan to feel it, to wake every morning knowing the walls were closing in, knowing the cousin he once mocked was now the shadow behind every downfall. The breaking point was near. Came during a shareholder meeting. Ryan stood before a room of investors, trying to reassure them. But the questions cut deeper than any knife. About the cancelled contracts. Where's the money? from the downtown project. Why are workers striking? Ryan's voice faltered. Sweat dripped down his forehead. For the first time, his confidence cracked in public. The investors whispered to each other, already calculating their escape. As Ryan stumbled through excuses, he looked up and froze. The back of the room, standing silently in the shadows, was Ethan, calm/composed, his eyes locked on Ryan's. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. Ryan lost his place his voice shook. He could feel every eye in the room turn toward him, sensing weakness, and Ethan simply turned and walked out, leaving Ryan drowning in silence. That night, Ryan smashed a glass against the wall of his office. He screamed at his assistants, fired 2 managers, and locked himself in his study. He poured drink after drink, but no amount of alcohol could drown out the truth. His empire was collapsing, and Ethan was the one pulling the strings. Ashford had grown colder in the years Ethan was gone, but tonight, the chill was sharper than usual. The streets buzzed with whispers. Ryan Harrington's empire was hanging by a thread. Projects abandoned, investors fleeing, workers unpaid. For the first time in a decade, Ryan wasn't the man everyone feared. He was the man everyone pitied. And Ethan decided the time had come. Ryan sat in his office, surrounded by half-empty bottles and stacks of papers. His suit was wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot. He hadn't slept in days. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Ethan, silent, watching, waiting. The door creaked open. Ryan looked up sharply. I said no interruptions, but his words died in his throat. Ethan stepped inside, calm as ever, his presence commanding the room. He wore a black coat, his expression unreadable, his eyes cold and steady. "Hello, cousin," Ethan said quietly. Ryan's chest tightened. For a moment, he was silent, as though staring at a ghost. You think you can just walk in here like this?" Ethan tilted his head. "I don't need permission. Not anymore." Ryan stood, trying to gather his old confidence, but his voice cracked. "What do you want, Ethan?" "Money. My businesses." "Is that it?" Ethan's gaze hardened. "You still don't get it. You took my family. You stole my father's life's work, crushed my mother, under your greed, left me with nothing. This isn't about money, Ryan. It's about justice." Ryan's fists clenched. "Justice? Don't fool yourself. The world doesn't care about justice. It cares about power, and I still have it." Ethan stepped closer, his voice low but sharp as a blade. "Power. Look around you. Your partners have left. Your workers hate you. Your empire is ashes. The only thing you have left is fear. And that belongs to me. Now." Ryan's mask finally cracked. He slammed his hands on the desk, shouting, "I built this from nothing. Your father was weak. He didn't have the stomach for real business. I did what I had to do, and I won." Ethan leaned forward, his face inches from Ryan's. "You didn't win. You cheated. You betrayed blood, and that's why you're standing here alone." Ryan's breathing grew heavy. His eyes darted around the room, searching for anything to hold on to. But there was nothing left. Ethan had stripped it all away. For a long, heavy silence, the 2 cousins stared at each other. One broken, one reborn. One consumed by greed, the other forged by loss. Finally, Ryan whispered, almost begging, "What are you going to do to me?" Ethan's lips curled into the faintest smile. "I don't have to do anything. You've already destroyed yourself. All I had to do was light the match." Ryan's knees buckled, and he sank into his chair, burying his face in his hands. For the first time, the once mighty Harrington looked small, just a man undone by his own sins. Ethan turned toward the door, but before leaving, he stopped, glancing back one last time. "You wanted to prove you were stronger than me. Congratulations, cousin. You've proven you were weaker than anyone imagined." With that, Ethan walked out, leaving Ryan alone in the ruins of his empire. Outside, the night was quiet. Ethan stepped into the cold air, his breath steady. For years, he had dreamed of this moment of vengeance, of watching Ryan crumble. And now, standing under the streetlights of Ashford, he finally felt it. Closure. But deep inside, another truth lingered. Revenge hadn't brought back his father. It hadn't saved his mother. It hadn't healed the years of pain. It had only ended the war. And sometimes, that had to be enough. The night after their confrontation, Ashford felt strangely still. The empire that once towered over the town was crumbling, its king dethroned. Ethan had won, at least. That's what victory was supposed to feel like. He stood at the edge of the old Carter workshop, what was left of it. Broken walls, rusted tools, dust-covered memories. His father's voice still echoed here, teaching him how to measure, how to dream. His mother's laughter lingered in the corners. Ethan closed his eyes, breathing in the silence. "I did it," he whispered. "I made him pay." But the words felt hollow. In the days that followed, news spread quickly. Ryan's name was plastered across headlines. Corruption scandal brings down Ashford's tycoon. His partners abandoned him. Lawsuits piled up. Banks seized his assets. Ryan Harrington, once untouchable, was now a pariah. And yet, Ethan didn't celebrate. He felt empty. Revenge had been his purpose for so long that without it, he wasn't sure who he was anymore. He had spent a decade chasing this moment. But what came after? One evening, Ethan returned to the cemetery. The autumn wind rustled the leaves as he stood between his parents' graves. "I kept my promise," he said quietly. "Ryan lost everything, just like we did. But," his voice broke, "it doesn't bring you back. It doesn't fill the hole he left." For the first time in years, Ethan let himself cry, not with anger, but with grief. He knelt by the headstones, the weight of his choices pressing down. Meanwhile, Ryan spiraled. Stripped of wealth, abandoned by allies, he drowned himself in alcohol and rage. Alone in a decaying mansion, he screamed at shadows, blaming Ethan, blaming fate, blaming anyone but himself. And then one night, he vanished. Some said he fled the country. Others whispered darker stories that he ended it himself. No one knew for sure, but Ethan did. Deep down, he knew Ryan was gone for good. Ashford began to move on. New businesses rose, families rebuilt, and the Harrington name became a cautionary tale. Ethan, however, struggled to find his place. People saw him as a survivor, even a hero, but he didn't feel like one. He had destroyed a man, but he couldn't rebuild his own heart. Months later, Ethan left Ashford once more. Not in anger this time, but in search of something greater. Perhaps peace, perhaps redemption, perhaps just a chance to live beyond revenge. As the bus carried him away from the town, he looked back one last time. The skyline was dotted with unfinished towers, Ryan's legacy of greed. Ethan whispered, "The past is over. Now, it's time to build something new." And with that, he turned his eyes to the horizon.